Go ahead. Do it. But know this, if you kill me, your people die too.
Ambassador Thest had rehearsed this briefing for 6 cycles. He had the holograms ready, the pheromone dampeners calibrated so his own nervousness wouldn't leak into the room, and a translation matrix tuned specifically for human idiom, since the last 3 briefings had gone sideways over metaphors. His audience was one person, Commander Ines Vail, newly appointed human envoy to the Thren Accord. She sat with one boot on the table, which he had been told was either deep disrespect or complete comfort, and no one on his staff could agree which. I need you to understand, Thest began, that the species you are about to encounter are not like your fictions. They are not misunderstood. They are not waiting to be befriended. They are apex organisms, refined by hundreds of millions of years of uncontested predation. Okay, Ines said. Show me. He showed her the Kethrai first, armored, 6-limbed, capable of shearing through starship hulls with claws that had evolved to crack the shells of their own planet's megafauna. Thest explained their kill counts, their territorial reach, the 11 star systems that paid them tribute in refined or rather than risk contact. Ines watched the footage with her chin resting on her knuckles. How do they track prey they can't see? Thest paused. Eye vibration. Ground-based vibration sensing. So they're blind past 30 meters in open terrain. That's not. He stopped. Yes, technically. She nodded once, already moving on before he'd finished being unsettled by the question. He pulled up the next file. The Ossuary Choir, a hive species whose members shared a single distributed nervous system across an entire colony structure. No individual choir member had ever been recorded surrendering, because no individual choir member experienced fear the way singular organisms did. They had ended 4 wars by simply not stopping. What happens to the choir if you sever the signal relay between colony nodes? Ines asked. You would need to be inside their perimeter to do that. I know, she said, and wrote something down. By the 4th species, Thest had stopped using the tone he reserved for newly contacted civilizations still afraid of airlocks. She didn't need it. She wasn't dismissive, and she wasn't performing bravery. She was doing something closer to homework. He kept waiting for a crack in her composure, and it never came, because there was no composure to crack. There was just a woman asking the only questions that had ever mattered and that no one, in the history of the Accord, had apparently thought to ask. You're not afraid of any of this, he finally said, which was unprofessional, and he knew it the second it left him. Ines looked up. I'm terrified. I've been terrified since the first slide. That's not the same as useless. He didn't have an answer for that, so he showed her the last one. The Varellan, a species that had achieved something close to religious status among predators, because they didn't hunt for food anymore. They hunted for proof. Proof that something in the galaxy could still surprise them. They had already logged humanity as a species of interest. They had not yet made contact. Ines closed her notebook. Good, she said. Get me a meeting with the Varellan. Commander, I cannot overstate how poor an idea that is. You're my liaison. I am your diplomatic liaison, which does not extend to arranging meetings with. She was already standing, and it was only then that the size difference struck him properly. She came up to roughly a third of his height, unarmored, unarmed by any weapon his sensors could detect. He had stood in a room with the Kethrai. He had watched choir engagement footage that had ended his appetite for a full cycle. And yet the detail that unsettled him most was that her boots made no sound at all against the deck plating. He filed the request. It took 14 days to arrange on a neutral station large enough to seat the Varellan delegation, which meant a chamber the size of a shipyard. Ines walked into it without slowing her pace. The lead Varellan was called Cascaril, and it moved like something that had never once needed to hurry. Its attention settled on the 4-person human delegation the way an incoming tide settles on a shoreline it has already decided to keep. You are very small, the translator rendered. Sure, Ines said. You eat things bigger than me for breakfast. I know your history, Cascaril replied, after a pause that felt deliberate. You are recent. You are unproven. I'm not asking you to prove anything about me, she said. I'm telling you what I've noticed about you. You don't hunt for hunger anymore. You hunt because everything got predictable, and predictable is worse than starving. That's not a compliment, by the way. That's a diagnosis. The chamber went very still. Thest's own vestigial fear response fired somewhere in his second nervous cluster. Continue, Cascaril said. We're new. We're inconsistent. We don't behave the way your models expect, because half the time we don't know what we're going to do until we've already done it. 11 species tried to classify us before you got here. All 11 are now revising those files. Ines tilted her head. The same casual gesture Thest had learned meant she was about to say something she'd already decided was true. You're not looking for prey. You're looking for something that keeps you guessing. I'm offering you exactly that. Not as dinner. As a standing appointment. Cascaril's great head lowered, slow as a moon-changing orbit, until it stopped less than 2 meters from her face. The room held its breath collectively, several species worth of breath, all at once. You smell, the translator finally managed, after 3 failed attempts, like something that intends to still be here in 1,000 years. Ines smiled. You have no idea. What emerged from that meeting wasn't a treaty in the conventional sense. It was closer to a formal acknowledgement. The Varellan designated humanity a standing interest, a classification that in their framework meant too unresolved to consume. Humans received passage rights through Varellan space. In exchange, humanity agreed to report anything it did that genuinely qualified as unprecedented, because apparently that was worth more to the Varellan than territory, tribute, or flesh. Thest filed the encounter as a diplomatic success. Then he sat with the report for a long time afterward. He thought about the 11 apex species on his original briefing list, and the qualities that had once seemed to define them: size, weaponry, kill count, territory held through fear. He thought about Ines's questions. Blind past 30 meters. Vulnerable at the relay nodes. Bored of certainty. He thought about boots that made no sound, and what kind of history produces a species that learns to move quietly on purpose. He understood, finally, that apex had never been a fixed rank on a chart. It was a question every species eventually got asked by something it hadn't accounted for. And the question humanity kept answering over and over, across every first contact on record, wasn't how much can you destroy. It was, what do you do when the thing you assumed was prey turns out to have been taking notes the entire time? Thest closed the file. Then he opened a new one, and began updating every predator profile in the Accord's archive, because he suspected they were all about to become obsolete.